Hey guys, welcome back to another podcast. My name is Natalie and I'm here today with Jen.
Hi.
Remind me of your last name.
Dorrough.
Dorrough.
I know, it's a tough one. It's fine.
Okay. Jen Dorrough. She is a very gifted communicator. She's a missionary within YWAM as well as myself. And we're here today for another podcast, kind of directing towards Gen Z again, Gen Alpha. This is here for you. So I just want to start off asking Jen some questions about who you are, what you're doing, why are you doing the things, and
the answer is I don't know.
Amazing. Moving on. Yeah. Just kidding. Who are you?
Yeah. Okay, I'm Jen Dorrough.
Amazing.
I've been in YWAM for I joined in 2005, so 19 years. And I did most of my growing up in YWAM at YWAM Colorado Springs. And so getting to come back here is kind of like coming back home a little bit. Although things also change so rapidly. It's always a little different every time I come, but it's fun. There's new life, new people, new energy. It's great. I really enjoy it. But right now, so about 9 years ago or so, my husband and I moved to a little farm town in Washington State, which is actually my hometown, Linden, Washington. And we pioneered a YWAM campus there. That was in early 2015. So, we've just sort of been plugging away since. We're a small campus. We have, I think, somewhere between 25 and 30 staff. And our big things are, the reason we felt like it was important for us to exist as a location was mobilization, seeing the church mobilized into missions, young people believing in them, knowing they're capable of great things, not wanting to hinder them, endorsing platforms for them to launch into missions, and the unreached, going to the hardest, darkest places. And the places, a lot of people are going to now, which is amazing. When I joined YWAM, I heard a speaker share actually that there were more, and I can't verify the statistic, but it motivated me nonetheless, that there were more missionaries in the state of Alaska than there were in all of North Africa, Central Asia, and the Middle East, Southeast Asia. So I don't know. For me, it was sort of like, well, why wouldn't I go? Because that's where a lot of people are, and there's not as many people reaching them. And that's been something that has kind of motivated my husband and I in the pioneering of our campus. But even prior to that, this idea that if people need to go, why not us? And specifically with mobilization, can we help get other people going? And that's just kind of what we've been doing for the better part of, I guess, going on 20 years now.
Wow. So very cool.
Yeah.
So how many YWAM bases have you been a part of? Yes.
So really deeply a part of just two, I would say, YWAM Colorado Springs and then now YWAM North Cascades. But I did staff A school at YWAM Kona, and we were on staff with the Frontier Missions team in Orlando, Florida for a little while. But both of those, and YWAM Vancouver, we helped them pioneer a new school in a new quarter. But those were sort of short, kind of one-off projects more than actually living there in those locations. But
yeah, totally. Cool. I wanted to ask, do you have specific places that your heart just really burns for, that you're like, I just really want to go here, can't wait to go back, I've been here, whatever? So I remember you were sharing something the other day, like the first few countries you go to, they say in missions will always hold a special place in your heart, which is like, I so agree.
Yeah, it's
I'm
true.
Like, these are all my favorite countries and they're only the ones I've been to.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Are there places that you feel specifically called to, or do you actually feel like you have more of a calling towards a kind of ministry that you can do wherever?
That's a good question. Yeah, to be really honest, the idea of calling for me, and even how I relate to calling, has been a kind of growing, ever-changing relationship a little bit. So I would have told you early on that I was called to the Middle East. But I think in part because I did my DTS outreach in the Middle East and I got to teach English. I really loved it. I stayed for the length of 2 DTS outreaches because I just wasn't ready to go home. I really enjoyed it. I felt like I came to life. The relationships that I built there needed more time. I just wasn't ready for it to be done. But I think for me now, calling has turned into something that is more or less any place that I can utilize my giftings and partner with God in building the kingdom wherever he has me. It feels a little more obedience-based, faithfulness kind of idea than specific places, people's times. But I do have, I would say Muslim women is still, anytime we pray for them or people talk about them, that feeling of having your heartstrings tugged on a little bit. I feel that in those moments. But I also really love young people and talking about the Bible and training. And so either I just have a lot of callings or I've just been lucky enough to get to enjoy most every place I've found myself as I've tried to follow the Lord as best I can.
Totally.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so beautiful. How would you say you kind of came to that realization that it wasn't more of a personal thing for you? Was it kind of just something you learned as a whole in ministry that was oh, maybe God doesn't need me to do this thing. Maybe it's just a lifetime with him. Can you explain a little bit of that?
Yeah. So I, for a long time, when it came to calling or having a calling, I think that I understood it to be very, very specific. And until I found that specific place or people or ministry or activity, I couldn't be obedient or I couldn't be faithful or fulfilled or, whatever. Whoa. Probably convoluted idea I had about what it meant to be called to something. And actually through, I think, just a natural process of growth and time, reading the works of really amazing authors and hearing people talk about their own stories, what really stuck out to me was this idea that is not my own, but I've really enjoyed thinking through and perpetuating, which is this idea that there is a highest calling for all of us, right? And that is to be in relationship with God. And it's never going to matter what I do and where I'm at and, anything in that kind of specificity. I get to have a relationship with God. And that's the source, that's the goal, it's the meat of my being, it's the great satisfaction of my life. And God wants that with all of us, and that's a thing that can motivate me, endorse me, pull me, invite me. It's just so rich and full. But that under that then is a second calling, which is the common calling of all believers. And that's the things we can obey without unique specific instructions because we already have them. They're in the Bible. Yeah. Right? The call to love our neighbor, the call to care for the orphan and the widow, the call to embrace our enemies and, whatever, to be generous and to tithe and to engage in submission and sacrifice. And you could spend your whole life just obeying every part of what we already know we should be doing without any extra narrative around the uniquenesses of me and who I am. And yet we serve a God who also cares about the uniquenesses of me and who I am. And so there's this, what I would call this kind of third calling. Again, not my original idea, but man, do I love it. This third calling that is then the specific calling. And I find that with the specific calling, we have to go into those expecting them to not be the whole picture and to change over time. Because I would say really clearly, there were times I was called to be a DTS leader, that I was called to fill a specific role for a specific time with specific people. I would say now I feel like I'm fulfilling the calling of being a YWAM campus director. It feels like just a specific role for a specific time for specific people. And it's a specific place. And I anticipate there will be a time that I don't have to do that anymore, that part of my calling will change and it'll be for good. It'll be because it's time for me to do something new, or I'm not the right leader for those people or that place anymore, or it's time for someone else to rise up and have place in that calling. Totally. And I'll be ready when that happens and excited to let it go because I know there'll be more specific callings for me because those really come and go. But the beauty of it is the undergirding and the foundation is not in the specific. That is a fruit or a byproduct of living out really well my highest and my common calling. And if I'm living well in intimacy and connection with the Lord, which honestly in my life looks a little different every day, but if I'm focusing on that first, the specific stuff really works itself out. Yeah. It becomes the opportunity I just want to try because maybe I'm wired that way, or the moment I get to do something and it's just really exciting and I feel the Holy Spirit using me in it. And it changes and it's seasonal and it's different. But I really love that. I love that I get to be a growing, changing, ebbing person, and that the specific calling does that with me as well, which is really beautiful. I'm not locked into one function forever. Yeah. But I am locked into one relationship forever. And that's my relationship with God. Wow. And I like it that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That's so beautiful. Yeah. Something you touched on earlier about how you were saying maybe that you won't be fit for that in the future, that there's a chance that like your role right now as the director is like, maybe in 5, 10, 15 years, you just won't be the one fit for that anymore. You know, like you said again the other day that we're in like youth with a mission. And so like, as you get, I don't know, I think you're 30. How old are you?
I'll be 39 in 2 months.
Yeah. Yep. And so like say in 10 years, you won't fit in the youth with a mission category. And it's like, it's like, okay, so then how do we champion young people? It's like, oh, then Jen might have to actually step out of her position. It's like, it actually takes a crazy amount of humility for you to know that that is like, that is it. Cause you recognize that it's not you that God needs. Like God doesn't need you, but he wants you and he sees you fit for that. And then is like, actually there's a time now, there's a time to change. Yeah. And so, when have you had moments where you had to lay down a certain calling for a season or forever, or a certain thing that you were doing for something else or for a shift?
That's a good question.
And I mean, I know that there's some areas that you could totally jump into with motherhood and things like that. I feel like that's a big one, but if you want to touch on that, absolutely. But if there are other areas too that you'd love to touch on, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think it's really important for any leader. And I just want to qualify all of this by saying that I've learned almost all of my best leadership lessons the hard way. And I don't know, maybe that's a human condition thing. Maybe it's just me because I'm stubborn. I don't know. But the things that I've learned deeply because I've learned them both in success and failure. And I think even in what you're asking me about with knowing when am I no longer fit for a particular role and is it time to give it up? I think even that lesson I learned really the hard way. And in part, I had an experience. So I when I first came into YWAM, I had an amazing DTS experience and all I wanted to do was lead DTSs. I was like, that was an incredible school training, growing, maturing season. I loved it so much. I just wanted to do more of it. And so that's what a lot of people do. They just go staff DTSs because they love their DTS. And it was great. And I ended up, my leadership was really gracious in identifying strengths in me early on, which also probably means that they were recognizing the weaknesses as well. They were just willing to cover those and partner with me anyways. And so I started leading DTSs, and the hurdles at that time actually were my age and my youth. Because I was in charge of this group of young people who were exactly my age and going through exactly the same things I was going through. And I was leading not people that I had years of wisdom and experience on, but people I was in the exact same place as. And I think one of the scariest forms of leadership is when you have to lead your peers. It makes your confidence feel so delicate, and it makes your sense of competency feel threatened almost constantly. And then on top of that, you're young, right? So there were just things I was just really blatantly immature in and needed to grow in. But I had amazing people cover me and make room for me. And what I loved about that season was that they didn't ask me to be a leader because I was competent. They asked me to be a leader because they were confident in my potential and my capacity. And it was important for me to have someone confident in me so I could become competent.
Yeah.
And that competency didn't come first, right? And where people trusted me, where people took a risk on me, where people had confidence in me, I was able to then become confident in myself. And where I felt more and more confidence, I developed competency over time. I developed, understanding and knowledge, and could look back and say, oh, when we did this and this, it was because of this principle or this, whatever. And I learned slowly while doing. Yeah. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about it's one of the risky things about YWAM, but it's one of the really beautiful things about YWAM. Mm-hmm. And it's wrapped up in that value of championing young people. So I experienced that from the get-go, and I kept leading DTSs. I eventually oversaw some DTSs and helped raise up leaders and whatnot. And that was important, and yet my hands were still really in it. Mm-hmm. And then we got to Linden and started pioneering YWAM North Cascades. And I just thought, well, I'm a DTS leader. I should be leading DTSs. And we're now, 10 years out from my very first DTS. And I still loved it. I still wanted to be doing it. And so I thought, well, why not? I know how to. I'm here. I'm competent. Mm-hmm. I'm confident. I'm all these things. And I felt... And I did. There was some need for me to lead it so that others could see it done and then they could be released. But a really big thing for me was I felt like the Holy Spirit said, Jen, you can't lead all these schools. And not because you may or may not do a good job, but because it's your turn to have confidence in those who don't have competency. And they don't get competent unless you believe in them, unless you champion them. And I realized that it wasn't that I was unfit. It was that I needed to move over. It was that I needed to allow the gift that I had experienced of someone just honestly out of bravery, really choosing to believe in me, to offer that to someone else. And that was the next iteration of my ability to be a leader, was to believe in other people, even when there wasn't competency and it felt risky. And so I think that was a moment where my calling really changed. Yeah. That was a moment where it wasn't the kind of specific function I had up until that point, and that I had in some ways not necessarily outgrown that role, because I think anyone can lead a DTS, and I do still enjoy leading DTSs, but it became about what is better for everybody else. Sure, you can do it, Jen, but we do young people, and we champion young people even when others don't believe in them, so let's do that. And that was a moment for me where it was a step aside moment. It doesn't matter if I can do it. The question is, should I do it? Right. And that's how I feel as a director as well. When I took over the directorship a couple of years ago up at North Cascades, I felt really strongly like I was to just make a 10-year commitment, and not because I would be incapable or not competent in 10 years, but that it would be time for someone else to get to grow in capacity and competency and competence. And that because we're a youth movement, we should have youth at the helm. And there is a risk in that. Yeah. Youth make things messy. I made a lot of really big mistakes. I hurt people. I said dumb things. Like, I think about the things that I said with like just this stupid confidence as a young leader, that now I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could get anyone who ever heard me say that in a room so I could just apologize. Like I was just literally too young to know better. And no young person trying to be a mature person means to hurt people. But I did. And yet people still believed in me. Yeah. And people still offered me a confidence that built my confidence, which eventually led to competence and a different kind of excellence in my life. I am not the same DTS school leader today that I was back in my first school in 06 or 07 or whenever it was. I'm not. But it didn't start with competence. It started with confidence. And I had leaders who believed in me. It was beautiful. And I get to do that now for other people. Oh. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
that was better than I could have asked.
Okay, good.
Okay, talk to me about what stepping into all different roles of leadership was like as a woman. Because I don't know, I'm a young woman. And I'm also stepping into a lot of roles of leadership, and I feel like a lot of my friends are as well. And it's like, some people are saying like, certain things you're hearing all this like, oh, what if they don't believe in you, or what if this, what if that, or like maybe some people aren't actually experiencing like any pull or opposition of them being a woman, and some people are experiencing a ton. So like I feel like you're very level-headed in a lot of ways, and so I feel like you have a very objective standpoint on it as well as a very personal standpoint on it. So what was that like for you stepping into it, kind of being in it now? Was it a lot of stuff that was like perceived, or was it personal, or was it offense that you like, oh, I just have to get over and realize that this is God who God made me to be, kind of things like that?
No, that's a really great question. So I do a lot of thinking about this idea of women in ministry, obviously because it's personal. I'm a woman in ministry. And to be totally honest, I was really well championed from the very beginning. Here at YWAM Colorado Springs, even in my church back home, I worked for a youth pastor prior to joining YWAM. I always really felt like people believed in me. And I know that's an asset. I know that's a gift. And I also know it's a gift not everyone had. And I feel like that deserves some credit, that is a part of how I see things. And yet I've also seen and experienced things that have felt like I felt marginalized by. But I think because I had such amazing people who believed in me, some of that marginalizing, specifically when it related to being a woman, it was painful and it hurt, but not probably to its fullest potential, like in the ways that it could.
Right.
Because I also knew that I was loved and cared for, and people wanted me to lead and to grow and to whatever. So I did have some of that really healthy foundation. And I grew up in a family where I felt so believed in. Like my dad, the way I think about him when I think about my childhood is him just sort of being like, I'm behind you, girl, whatever you want. You know, like I could have had the craziest ideas and he would have been like, yeah, let's figure out how to do it. And my mom in her own way too, like, even though she was always like, well, how are we going to do that? I knew she would do anything to help me.
Totally.
And so, so being believed in has always been the angle of my story, the bent that I've had. But there have been times, specifically as a young female DTS leader, where I've had male students that really, really quickly, everyone in the room knows they don't like that I'm their leader. Sometimes, to be honest, I can't even say that it was all gender related, but there are also times we all know it was gender related. So sometimes I'm sure it was age or personality or whatever. And that was really hard because especially in, say my early 20s, I already had a hard time believing in myself.
Yeah.
So then to have people telling me I shouldn't be believed in, or I shouldn't be released, or I shouldn't be championed, really threatened my sense of security in who I was and what God was asking of me and what I was capable of. And so there were definitely times that the opinions of, honestly, both men and women, in fact, some of my harshest critiques as a woman in ministry have been from other women. And I just want to look at them and say, wait, but you're a woman too. How does this make sense to you? But I get it. We all have different perspectives. And, but it was hard. It was hard, not because it stopped me, because again, I had really great people championing me, but because it felt like what they were saying is that who I am will never be right or never be enough.
Okay.
And ironically, I also have like this underlying story in my life I'm constantly battling that I'm also too much. And so there became in my early 20s this sort of these dueling lies that I'm too much, but I'm also not enough. And the not enough really came from being a woman, being young, being, that sort of thing. And the too much came from my personality, the woo factor, the charisma, the outgoing, loud, thing. And those, I just felt like there was this war within me constantly between those two things, and that they were in some way being affirmed by the narrative around me, the story being spun around me, and the story I was spinning for myself. And that was hard. I, again, either just because I'm stubborn and or probably simultaneously just had incredible people around me. It did make me want to actually not give up as opposed to quit.
Yeah.
So I can't speak to whether or not that was healthy at the time, but it did keep me, it bolstered my endurance, which was really good, just to stick it out and keep doing it.
Yeah.
But there were times, and not in one particular instance, but just all over the place, especially because we're an denominational organization. Everybody comes from different perspectives. And so I feel a little bit like while I was single, there was less narrative around Jen can't do these things. It was actually really interesting. Once I got married, and I got married at 28, and had already been in leadership and whatnot, it sort of became, it felt like what people were asking me was, okay, Jen, so you had your single life, you had your single leadership, now you do Jeremy's calling. Now you, and again, like, no one explicitly said this to me, but it was like between the lines, or the tone.
Yeah.
And probably I have to give credit to the fact that it was also probably me just being fearful that that's what they thought.
Yeah.
Um,
That's so good.
and
That's such
so-
an honest thought right there. That's so honest.
Yeah, I'll be the first to tell you I've got all sorts of probably unhealthy thoughts going through my head. I'm constantly battling. And that was one of them, feeling like, am I a valuable human because I'm a woman? And I had this revelation probably way later in life than I should have, but this was all around 2020 when some of the tensions with the election was going on, and some of the racial topics that were coming up, and the things people were being forced to face in our country and in our nation. And I heard a speaker say, who happens to also be a friend of mine, he was talking about marginalized people and vulnerable people. And he was asking us, he was saying, why do marginalized and vulnerable people matter? You know, we all had ideas, we had a discussion, we were talking about it. And at the very end, he just said this thing that like was so unprofound, it was profound. He said, they matter because they have always mattered. From the beginning of time, from their inception, their design, creation, they have always mattered. And we don't actually get to decide whether or not they matter now, because they have always mattered, and God determined that they mattered. And I mean, that was like, I felt freedom in my spirit in that moment, just on that topic. But then I also felt it as a woman. And I felt like Holy Spirit turned it around on me and said, Jen, why do you as a woman matter? Why do you matter? Why do females matter? And I just felt like I heard him say, because you've always mattered. You've always been a part of my plan. You've always been as I've intended, as I've created, and I have fullness and wholeness in store for you. And I was like, you're right, God. I have always mattered. I don't know. It's like this this revelation that I both felt silly having. So I was like, why did I not think of this sooner? But also changed everything for me. And it was so helpful to go back to that confidence thing, knowing again, and I honestly was probably like 32 or 33 years old when I had this moment in my life. And I felt like I could go into, say, a meeting with a pastor of a denomination where women are not allowed to be in leadership or eldership or pastor churches or whatever, and be really confident that it's important I'm in that room, because it's always been important that I participate in the things of God as He's intended them. And I think also what that did for me was it gave me it forced me to relax a little, because someone else's opinion wasn't the determining factor of my value. That was already determined. So what I got to do with value was be compassionate and kind in a room where they didn't know whether or not they wanted me in that room. And I feel like that's been an important part of my leadership, especially as a woman, is to be able to say, it's okay if you don't know if you want me here. I know who sent me, but I'm also not going to force myself on you. So let's figure out this harmonious, be at peace with one another dance. And I can be flexible because I know my value. And I know that I matter because women have always mattered. And that was just a huge, huge turning point for me.
Dang. Wow. I matter.
Yeah, you do.
So
because you've
good.
always mattered.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Dang, you're right. It's so like not profound that it's so
I know.
profound. That's crazy.
It's like painfully obvious.
yeah, you're like, oh.
Like literally the beginning of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
I know.
That's good. That's
I know.
good. Wow. Dang, I'm getting ministered to.
Good. Yay. I'm glad.
So good. So I had a mom walk up to me. Oh gosh, this was like a couple months ago, right when we got the podcast off the ground. Like this is still pretty fresh and new. And she just came up to me. Her son was in DTS, and she's like, "Hey, I'm a mom from Texas, and I'm like just a fan of the podcast." I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that anyone actually listened to those.
Didn't know I had fans."
And so I was like, "Oh, first fan moment." No, so not important. But it was this like, the Lord had kind of struck something in me. It was like, this isn't just for Gen Z, and so I feel like this kind of a moment that I want to take in, like, you as a mom.
Yeah.
What does your life look like right now? Like, what do your quiet times look like? What are your how is that shifted? How are you doing whatever you're doing unto the Lord and still fulfilling what you're supposed to be doing as a mom and not making it like you're not one. I've learned this about you in the last week. I've only known you for a couple of days, kind of, but you're not mystically weird about the Spirit and about God.
Thank you. That's really a compliment.
You're really
to me.
not. Like, you're so down to earth, and you're so like, this is just the way of God,
Mm.
and you don't have to like. I don't know. You don't have to like squint your eyes and wait for like, I know, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think people do that, but you don't make it mystical and weird. And so, so I feel like you have a very objective way to kind of look at it. Like, how do you balance like motherhood, calling, life, ministry, all of that? And I feel like you have maybe a typical answer for what I've heard that answer be.
I mean, maybe, I don't know. I guess I'll just answer it and then we'll find out. But so the way that well, let me preface by saying this. I have an incredible husband. We've not always been kind to each other. We've had to work out our crap just like everybody else. But one thing that Jeremy has always been such a blessing to me in is that he has never underestimated the things that I am capable of and should be doing. Like, and he has never once made me feel like choosing ministry or family or like it was an either or ever. And that somehow I had to make that I was the only one sacrificing. He always from the very beginning has been very clear and resolute on the fact that we mutually make sacrifices and we do this together. And so that I mentioned that because I know I got a gift in that. I got a huge gift in just who he is. And I know a lot of that for him came from seeing his parents do ministry together and who his mom is and her calling. And so I'm reaping the benefits of that in really awesome ways.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, no, exactly. Really amazing ways. Wow. Yeah. And so in light of that, I would say we have probably erred on the side of having blurry boundaries when it's come to like work and family and play and rest and all these things, because Jeremy and I both are very determined, go-getter, high achiever, active kind of people. But the thing that actually I learned from women in YWAM who went before me that was really, really helpful was I heard a major leader in YWAM. I won't say the name because I don't actually remember exactly who it was. I just think I remember. Anyways,
Yes, 100%.
She said something along the lines of, it's okay when you're having kids and starting a family to think through how many kids can I be the best mom to?
Whoa.
And I had never heard it put that way before. Like I'm allowed to consider, I think God determines, but I'm allowed to consider, am I going to be a really amazing mom to just one kid, to 2 kids, to 3 kids, right? Like and what I loved about that is it endorsed my part in my family with God, which was really beautiful. And so that's been an important part of us thinking through, not that we then said, okay, we're only going to have one kid or what. It wasn't really that blatant, but it gave me the freedom to feel like I can be done when we're collectively ready to be done.
Wow.
And that I can be done and know that I'll be a really good mom to the number of kids that I have. And I know that's a different way of thinking about it. And I also know that I have a different bent towards motherhood. Like maybe I shouldn't say bent. I don't know. It's hard for me to talk about this because I've said these sorts of things and offended a lot of mothers, and I don't mean to. So I try hard not to, but I just feel like JoJo, my daughter, I am her mom before I'm a campus director and I'm a DTS leader and a whatever. I am her mom first. I would say the same about my husband. I'm a wife first to Jeremy. And I consider those a part of my really specific calling, right? I'm specifically Jeremy's wife and specifically JoJo's mom. And I don't take for granted that I am, because I know even those things could change, right? We at our campus have experienced tragedy and pain and hard things. And so I just know I can't take that for granted.
Yeah.
I've got to really live out this specific calling with the most honor to them and to God that I can. I'm not always good at it, but I try. But I felt like it's not me to JoJo. It's JoJo and I. We're figuring out this relationship together. She gets to come and participate in my life as well. Just in the same ways I get to go and enter her world and participate in her life. And I think about it in all sorts of ways. Like, I've had meetings at the campus and she comes and she sits and she colors, or she bangs on the drums, or she sits in the meeting and she has opinions because she's my daughter. So she has opinions, right? Like, she gets to participate. Yeah. She colors on the whiteboard and all the staff know her and she knows their names, and she names her stuffies after my staff members. And like, it's so hilarious. She's obsessed with the name of Maya right now, which is one of my staff members. And so she's naming all her stuffies like Sugar Sprinkles of Maya. And anyways, it's hilarious. So like she is welcome in every part of my life.
Wow.
Right? That there's this compartmentalized idea. And maybe it's that I'm a blurry, chaotic person. And so lines don't always work super well for me. But she gets to be a part of all of my life.
Wow.
Right? And I'm a part of all of her life, right? So there are also times where I can't participate in the function of being a director because I need to be sitting in the bleachers at swim lessons, or I need to be at dance class, or it's like I serve pizza at her school, or recess duty, which I hate, but I do it, right? Like there's this mutuality to it's us together. Right. I would say the same. I'm excluding my husband right now, but he's involved in this as well, obviously. Absolutely. Right. It's this mutual involvement in each other's life that I actually really feel like I've learned while watching other moms in YWAM. I've also seen things that I was like, nah, I don't want to do it that way. Yeah. But that's okay. We all see things that are different than how we'd want to do it. But I just feel like the first DTS I led after JoJo was born, she was maybe like 9 months old. And I had her in the back of the room while a speaker was there. And I was so embarrassed because she was being so loud. And I picked up all her toys and I grabbed her and I tried to rush out of the room into another office. And the speaker said, Jen, she is acting her age. Let her be in this place. And it just changed everything about how I knew how I could make room for her. And I remember in that moment that she's not a nuisance to anybody. She's invited in this place. And she was exacting exactly her age, a 9-month-old baby, cooing and rolling and throwing and screaming and and that's okay, because in community we make room for everybody to act in accordance with what they're capable of. Wow. And where they're at. Wow. And the thing that's so funny is we do it all the time in DTSs, right? I'm like, I'm going to compensate for you because you have a deficit here, or a blind spot, or you need covering, or you need whatever. I do it for other adults all the time. Yeah. But for some reason, I thought my baby had to behave like an adult. Whoa. Or couldn't be in the room. Dang. And when she said that, when she was like, whoa, Jen, she's just acting her age. I was like, you're right. This is what she's capable of. And she's welcome in this place, even like this. And that was huge for me to hear that. And I thought, man, that's such a good lesson for me. How many times have I been invited into a space where I've, misbehaved or gotten it wrong or hurt people or whatever, and people have said, it's okay. You're just acting the way you know how to act. Whoa. But we're here to help you grow and to challenge you. Yeah. And you're still welcome. Dang. And I thought, even my baby's welcome.
Well,
yeah. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
totally.
Yeah.
That's so good. I'm going to touch on one little part in
Yeah.
that. So what does your relationship with the Lord look like? And how has it changed? Yeah. Just kind of, because I feel like there could be literal like moms who are at home just cleaning, listening to this. There could be like, they could be just dropping their kids off at school or like waiting to hear a phone call from their son at DTS, but they haven't heard from them in 2 weeks. And you're like, have you done your laundry? Are you live?
Yes.
What nation are you in still?
Yeah, exactly.
So valid, so real. If you're listening to this and you're on outreach, please call your mom.
Yes.
Seriously, call your mom. She's worried sick. Anyways.
She's worried you are sick.
Yeah, that also too. And even if you are, tell her you're okay.
Exactly.
Because you will be. Yes. In Jesus' name.
And moms, no news is good news. Okay.
Say it again. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Like what? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it has changed so much, my relationship with the Lord. I would say my relationship with the Lord has gotten deeper and stronger. How I relate to him has changed.
Whoa.
And I think mostly just because I have other requirements on my time that are just really deeply valid and important. And so I actually remember having a Marco Polo with one of my friends. She lives in, she's in Indonesia, and we were Marco Poloing back and forth, and she was having her quiet time, but she had like cold cup of coffee and like a kid crawling on her lap. And she's like, I've been trying to do my quiet time for the last like hour and a half, whatever. And I keep getting interrupted. And I just thought, isn't that it? Isn't that the picture of the kind of intimacy of motherhood and God? You know, like that I feel like what I've learned in motherhood as it relates to my relationship with God is he's gonna be flexible with me, and he's gonna meet me wherever I'm at, whether it's washing the dishes, folding the laundry. Oh, he has to meet me folding the laundry because I hate folding the laundry.
Amen.
Anyways, it takes the Holy Spirit for me to even do that. Anyways, but additionally, I feel like I really had to learn that it is quality over quantity. And there was a time when I was young, I was here, I was on staff. I would like journal for hours, and I would listen to worship music for like 6 hours a day. Like, what was I even doing? What was my job? Who is not making me do my job? That's what I want to know. Anyways, I'm like having these amazing quiet times. I'm reading the word. Very fruitful, very profitable, very good, but not realistic for this season. Yeah. And I remember, I don't know whether the Holy Spirit or just my own conclusion, I remember coming to a place where I had to finally understand the time I had is not possible now. But it doesn't mean I love Jesus less.
Right.
And I can still have deep, intimate connection points with God in very little time. And I think for me, the win has been that it's not that my relationship has stayed exactly the same and the external environment has changed. It's that my relationship with God has changed while the external environment is changing. And so the beauty is, the harder the external environment gets for me to feel like I get what I'm craving, the deeper my relationship with God has also been getting, so it can tolerate more changes. Wow. And that has been, I think, the biggest saving grace for me, because I didn't become a mother until I was 33. And I feel like I used to always say that I never wanted to be an old mom. Now I see the perks in it. And one of those perks for me has been that I had such a growing, changing, maturing relationship with God that when those kinds of external pressures came, the relationship was ready for it. Wow. And so I could do the same amount of tending to my relationship with God in less time. Wow. Because we had more history, more familiarity, and more intimacy. Wow. And granted, I, through all of that, have had seasons of feeling dry, or a valley season, or a dark night of the soul, or you name it, I felt it. Awesome. And yet, all of those things have been compounding towards intimacy. Yeah. And so the environment, to me, has often just been, it needs to be dealt with because it is reality, but it cannot become an excuse. Yeah. And as the environments change, the seasons change, you will have been investing in your relationship with God over time, and it'll be able to withstand any changes life throws its way. And I think that's the only reason I feel like motherhood didn't somehow halt or mute my relationship with God, was because it had gotten to a place where it could withstand the external pressures and resistance.
Whoa.
Yeah. I think that's what I think.
So good. I think that's great.
I hope this stuff is good, because half the time I say it out loud and I'm like, yeah, I like that. Sometimes I say things out loud and I'm like, maybe I don't like that as much.
Yeah.
We'll let that one ruminate a little longer. Yeah.
I'm the same way. It's so good. That's so fun. I feel like I'm literally talking to myself in like 20 years. It's awesome.
I feel honored.
It's so fun. You walked in the room and you were teaching like on Monday, and I was talking to Meg. I was like hitting Meg. I was like, this is me.
Oh,
like,
I love it.
It was awesome. And so a lot of what you're saying is very much deeply resonating with me. So thank you.
I feel honored by that.
Yeah. So I want to wrap this up, but I want to, do you have anything like over any of the topics we talked about, to either Gen Z, women, moms, any of that?
Oh gosh.
If you could give like, I don't know, if anything comes to mind of just a piece of advice for like either like sustaining your relationship with the Lord through so much change, or calling, or what that looks like, really anything of the sort, if you could just give like kind of a, I don't know what you call it, like I literally can't think of anything other than just a sentence or two of something. Of just a piece of wisdom from a mom, from a woman, from a sister, from a friend.
Sure. I mean, I can give it my best shot. At least,
give whatever.
I think like, so when I think about anyone listening to this podcast, if there were one thing I would want them to take away, I think it would be, as women, you are worth believing in. I think that is just so important. And I know it's true because I was gifted that as a young woman, and I had people threaten it as a young woman. And I would just never, ever, ever want a young woman to think I somehow have less potential because I'm a woman. So I would definitely want them to walk away with that. And I think too, like, motherhood is supposed to change us, but it is supposed to change us towards God. And it's meant to be an opportunity to invite our children towards God. And how we do that gets to be really unique based on the family unit God has designed. And yet I would love to see more mothers who have the ability and capacity to welcome their children into every part of their life, and vice versa. And I actually honestly know a lot of moms who do that really, really well. And like some of my mom heroes, in YWAM, out of YWAM, they're doing this. They're showing their kids what kind of life is possible with God, because their kids have proximity to them, and they get to witness their mother's faithfulness. Wow. And that mother's faithfulness is it was a gift to me, and I'm hoping it'll be a gift to JoJo as well. Totally. So I believe in young people. I want, where they have confidence, we can get to competence. Yeah. But I would want to be a leader who moves over and makes room for them. So I don't want to outstay my welcome. I want to make room for young people.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's so good. I think that's also just so convicting for leaders listening, of like, oh man, like, have I outstayed my welcome? Or is there anyone that I need to bring in that you see? Because I think sometimes the Lord will put people in a position of like almost leadership or a potential for leadership. Right. And you're watching them and you're like, that could be so bad. Yeah. But then it's also like the Lord's like, but how good could it be? Yeah. And like, who's going to believe in them if you don't? He's like, I can move them elsewhere, but like, do you want to pick this up? I think it's just so cool.
And what better champion than a leader who has moved over and can now walk next to them? So and we have to have elders. We have to have the wisdom that comes with age. We young people, that's a gift and a value when we have that. And so where, as a leader, I can move over and young people can come in, I can offer age. And often what they offer is enthusiasm, and it's really beautiful. And I love it. And so we make good partners.
Oh, so good. Yeah. Oh, well, Jen, I wish we could talk for forever. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate it. I really have nothing else for you guys. You're amazing. Thank you for spending time with me.
Of course.
And I hope you guys have a very blessed day, night, afternoon, drive, whatever you're doing listening to this. Just be so blessed. We love you guys, and talk to you next time.